The aroma of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie filled my father's mansion, but all I could smell was my stepmother's expensive perfume as she blocked my path to the dining room. "Oh, Alexandra," Barbara said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "The adults' table is full. Why don't you sit with the children? It's more appropriate." I glanced past her to the main dining table, where my father sat at the head, deep in conversation with my stepbrother David about their company's latest acquisition. At 34, I was hardly a child, but that had never mattered to Barbara. In her eyes, I would always be the awkward teenager who didn't fit into her perfect family portrait. "The kids' table?" I kept my voice neutral, though my hands clenched at my sides. "I haven't sat there since I was 16. "Well, we have important business matters to discuss." She gestured to the main table where various executives from Harrison Global sat with their spouses. "You wouldn't understand anyway, dear. You've never had a head for business." If she only knew. While they thought I was running a small investment advisory firm, I had quietly built Harrison Capital into one of the most powerful private equity companies in New York. The press called me the ghost because no one knew who owned the firm that was systematically acquiring some of the city's most prestigious businesses, including, as of this morning, controlling interest in Harrison Global. "Fine," I said, turning toward the rickety card table set up in the corner. "I'll sit with the kids." Barbara's triumphant smile followed me as I made my way past my teenage cousins and their smartphones. My father didn't even look up as I passed, too engrossed in explaining Harrison Global's 5-year expansion plan to David, a plan I knew would never materialize. "Alex," my 10-year-old cousin Tommy beamed as I sat down. "Want to see my new video game?" I smiled genuinely for the first time that evening. "Sure, buddy." At least the kids were real. No hidden agendas, no social climbing, just honest enthusiasm for life. Unlike the main table, where every conversation was a carefully choreographed dance of power and influence. Harrison Global's stock hit another record high today, David announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Dad's leadership is really taking the company to new heights. I bit back a smile, thinking of the documents sitting in my office downtown. Harrison Global's stock price was artificially inflated, propped up by creative accounting and my father's reputation. Tomorrow, everything would change. "Alexandra," my father finally acknowledged my existence. "How's that little investment firm of yours doing?" Before I could answer, David snickered. "Still giving financial advice to retirees, sis?" "Something like that," I replied, watching Barbara beam at her precious son. "You know," David continued, "if you ever want to learn real business, I could probably find you an entry-level position at Harrison Global. Something simple, of course." The kids' table suddenly felt like the perfect vantage point to observe this scene of family dysfunction. My father, once a brilliant businessman, had become complacent, letting David and Barbara's influence cloud his judgment. They turned Harrison Global, the company my grandfather built, into a hollow shell of its former glory. My phone buzzed quietly in my pocket. A message from my assistant. "Everything's set for tomorrow. Press release scheduled for 9 a.m. Anyone interesting at your new firm?" Barbara asked with feigned interest. "Any potential suitors? You're not getting any younger, dear." I thought about Michael Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Industries, who had just agreed to be Harrison Capital's new president after the takeover. He'd been quite interested when I revealed I was the mysterious owner he'd been negotiating with for months. "No one special," I said. "Such a shame," Barbara sighed dramatically. "All work and no play. No wonder you're still single." I glanced at my watch. In less than 15 hours, Barbara would learn exactly how I spent my time. The thought almost made the kids' table worth it. "More turkey, Alexandra?" my father called out, finally remembering his actual daughter existed. "No thanks," I replied, watching him return his attention to David immediately. My father hadn't always been this way. Before Barbara, before he became obsessed with molding David into his perfect hair, he'd been different. He'd been the one who taught me about business, who let me sit in his office after school and learn about stocks and investments. But that changed when he married Barbara 12 years ago. Suddenly, everything became about David, the son he never had. I was quietly pushed aside, my suggestions ignored, my insights dismissed. Even after graduating top of my class from Wharton, I was still just his little girl who didn't understand business. So I left, took my trust fund and the lessons my father had taught me, and built something of my own. Something bigger than Harrison Global would ever be under their leadership. Alex, Tommy tugged at my sleeve. Can you help me with my math homework after dinner? Dad says I need to learn about money if I want to be successful like Grandpa. I looked at this innocent kid, untainted by the family's politics. Sure, Tommy, I know a thing or two about money. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of business boasting from the main table. David detailed his plans to acquire smaller tech companies. My father nodded approvingly at everything his Stetson said. Barbara orchestrated the conversation like a conductor, ensuring everyone knew exactly who was in charge of the family's future. Harrison Global will hit $10 billion in market cap next year, David proclaimed. Maybe then we can upgrade from the kids' table. Everyone at the main table laughed. I smiled too, but for a different reason. I checked my phone again. Another message from my assistant. Sign company confirmed for 8 a.m. installation. All paperwork filed. Alexandra, Barbara called out, since you're sitting with the children, perhaps you'd like to help clear the tables. The adults need to discuss some confidential business matters. I stood up, gathering plates from the kids' table. Of course. Don't let me interrupt the important people. That's the problem with Alexandra, I heard Barbara Sage whisper to my father. No ambition. No understanding of real business. Thank goodness we have David to carry on your legacy. If she only knew that while they were planning their next fiscal quarter, I was planning to own the entire company, that every major decision they'd make from tomorrow onward would require my approval, that the Harrison name they were so proud of would soon have a very different meaning. Thanks for sitting with us, Alex, Tommy said as I helped him with his coat later. The kids' table is more fun anyway. I hugged him goodbye. You're right, buddy. Sometimes the best view is from the sidelines. Driving home to my penthouse apartment, the one my family had never seen, I thought about tomorrow, about the look on their faces when they realized that the unsuccessful daughter they'd relegated to the kids' table had outmaneuvered them all. My phone rang, Barbara calling, probably to remind me about some family obligation I was failing to fulfill. I let it go to voicemail and turned onto Park Avenue, where Harrison Global's headquarters dominated the skyline. Tomorrow that building would have a new name, and everyone would finally understand why the kids' table had the best seat in the house. The next morning, I arrived at my office in Harrison Capital's unmarked building at 7:30 a.m. The sign company's trucks were already positioned in front of Harrison Global headquarters across the street, though the workers hadn't started yet. They were waiting for my signal. Good morning, Miss Harrison. My assistant Sarah greeted me with coffee. Your father has already called 3 times. Of course he had. The morning's financial news was reporting unusual trading activity in Harrison Global stock, and major shareholders had been quietly contacted about an upcoming announcement. And David? I asked, settling behind my desk. 6 calls, plus 2 rather aggressive voicemails. Sarah's lips twitched. He seems concerned about the board meeting scheduled for 10 a.m., the one he just found out about. I smiled, remembering David's boasting at the Thanksgiving table just yesterday. Has the press release been distributed? Scheduled for 8:30, right after the sign change. Speaking of which, she gestured to my window, where the first crane was moving into position. My phone buzzed. Barbara calling again. I let it go to voicemail and instead opened the morning's report. Harrison Global's stock had been halted pending the announcement, but rumors were already spreading. The business news channels were running speculation about a possible hostile takeover. If they only knew it wasn't hostile at all. The board had approved everything weeks ago, tired of David's mismanagement and my father's blind faith in his Stetson. At 8:15, Sarah appeared in my doorway. They're ready. I stood up, straightening my suit. Let's give them a show. The first workers began dismantling the giant Harrison GLBL letters that had dominated the building's facade for 20 years. A crowd was gathering on the street below, including several news crews. I spotted my father's town car pulling up, followed by David's Tesla. Right on schedule. What the hell is going on? My father's voice boomed through the lobby of Harrison Global as I walked in. Who authorized this? David was already shouting at the building manager. Stop them immediately. I demand to know who ordered this. I did. My voice cut through the chaos. They turned, faces draining of color as they saw me standing there in my executive suit, nothing like the casual clothes I wore at family gatherings. Alexandra? My father stepped forward. What are you talking about? Barbara burst through the doors, her designer handbag swinging wildly. What is she doing here? This is a family matter. Exactly, I smiled. A family matter. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in the boardroom. The boardroom? David scoffed. You have no authority here, sis. Security. Actually, I held up my phone, displaying the official documents. As of 8 a.m. this morning, I have full authority. Harrison Capital now owns controlling interest in Harrison Global. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the workers continued removing the old sign. Harrison Capital? My father's voice was barely a whisper. My company, I explained calmly. The one you've all been too busy to ask about. We specialize in acquiring underperforming companies with strong potential. Companies like this one. David lunged forward. This is impossible. I would have known if someone was buying up shares. Would you? I raised an eyebrow. Like you knew about the 3 failed acquisitions you tried to hide last quarter, or the creative accounting that's been masking the company's real financial state. My father's face went pale. David, what is she talking about? She's lying, David shouted, but his eyes darted nervously to the papers in my hand. The board didn't think so, I continued. They voted unanimously for the acquisition last week. Check your email. The official announcement goes out in about 2 minutes. Barbara stepped between us, her perfect makeup already showing signs of stress. Robert, don't listen to her. She's just jealous of David's success. She's always been jealous. I laughed softly. Jealous? Of what? The man who's driven our grandfather's company to the brink of insolvency, who's been cooking the books to hide his failures. That's not. David started, but I cut him off. The SEC filing details everything, David. Every misleading report, every hidden loss. Would you like me to continue this discussion here in the lobby, or should we take it upstairs? My father sank into a nearby chair, looking suddenly old. How did you do this? I learned from the best, I said quietly. Remember those afternoons in your office before Barbara? When you taught me about business, about seeing opportunities others missed. I was paying attention. Outside, the last letter of the old sign came down. The crowd had grown larger, phones recording everything. You can't do this to us. Barbara hissed. We're family. Family? I turned to her. Like when you put me at the kids' table yesterday, when you've spent years treating me like an embarrassment? That kind of family. My phone buzzed. The press release had gone out. On the street, reporters were already going live with the story. The board meeting starts in an hour, I announced. David, you'll need to prepare a formal resignation. Dad, you can stay on as chairman emeritus if you wish, but operational control transfers to Harrison Capital effective immediately. And if we refuse? David's voice shook with rage. Then the SEC gets the uncensored version of those financial reports. Your choice. Barbara grabbed my father's arm. Robert, do something. But my father was staring at the papers in my hand, recognition dawning in his eyes. You used my own lessons against me. I used them to save your company, I corrected him. Harrison Global was 3/4 away from a major crisis. David's mismanagement would have destroyed everything grandfather built. You ungrateful little. David started toward me, but security stepped forward. My security. Mr. Harrison, one guard said firmly, please step back. The new sign was being lifted into place now. Harrison Capital in sleek, modern letters. Below it in smaller text. Founded by Alexandra Harrison. The shareholders. David tried one last time. Are thrilled, I finished for him. The stock will resume trading at 11 a.m. Our analysts project a 30% jump once the market digests the news about new management. Barbara had started crying, her mascara running. How could you do this to your own brother? Stepbrother, I corrected her. And I learned from you, Barbara. Family is business, right? That's what you've always said. My father stood up slowly. All these years while we thought you were running a small investment firm, giving advice to retirees, I smiled. I was building something bigger than Harrison Global ever was. Something real, not built on ego and false projections. The new sign was fully installed now, gleaming in the morning sun. Cameras flash as reporters got their shots. The board meeting is in the main conference room, I said, turning toward the elevators. I trust you all know the way, unless you prefer to sit at the kids' table. That evening, after the dust had settled and the papers were signed, I sat in what had been my father's office, now mine. The view of Manhattan at sunset was exactly as I remember from those childhood afternoons. Sarah brought in the evening papers. The story was everywhere. Harrison Global acquired in surprise takeover. Daughter takes control. A new era for Harrison Empire. Wall Street's ghost revealed. My phone had been buzzing all day with messages from family members. Cousin Tommy had texted, "Does this mean I can sit at the grown-up table now?" I smiled and texted back, "Any table you want, buddy." A knock at the door, my father standing there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "The board was right," he said quietly, "about everything." "David, I should have seen it." "You saw what you wanted to see," I replied. He nodded slowly. "And you? What do you see?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "I see a company that needs rebuilding, a legacy that needs protecting, and a father who might remember he has a daughter who learned everything he taught her." He sat down heavily. "When did you become so formidable?" "I always was, Dad. You just forgot to look." We talked for hours that night, really talked for the first time in years. About business, about family, about the future. Barbara and David had already cleared out their offices, their resignations effective immediately. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles. But for now, this was enough. As I drove home that night, I passed Harrison Global, now Harrison Capital, its new sign illuminated against the dark sky. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about building something so magnificent they can't ignore you anymore. And sometimes the kids' table gives you the perfect view of everything you're going to change.